do the facilitation, not moderation, because I saw the conflict between moderator and panelist in the previous session. So I'm going to facilitate this session. Uh, I'm really proud to have such a distinguished panelist alongside me, and I'm really good to have you here, sir. Uh, I'm sure they will cover up for my mistakes. My heartbeat is running faster because I have to catch a flight at 1:15. So I will rush through stuff, and my panelist will help me to catch my flight. Uh, Before the start of the proceeding, I would like to throw a couple of points. I saw there are a lot of intelligence here available in the room. So keeping the voluntary spirit in mind, how much would you like to get involved while discussion is going on? I'm going to actually check with you. So there are two options we have. We had actually seen the previous session pattern where actually there's a facilitator discussing with panelists. The other one is there is a presentation that is going to happen by some of our panelists, and then they can throw back question at you, or you can throw back question at them. So tell me which one you want to go for. Raise your hand. The first one or second one? The second one. Okay. The audience wants that we should involve them more. Yeah. So instead of bringing our actually stuff together, we can actually bring their thoughts as well. So the topic, which is an interesting one, but little dull sometimes. It sounds dull as well. But we need to actually make it interesting with the help of the audience here. And I am sure that we have such a panelists who have different kinds of experience. People from education, CSR, people from background of running organization, and how they combine both business and literature together. Between profit, loss, and prestige, market and daily life in literature. This is an interesting one because on a lighter note, if you look at, this is an age-old fight. The fight between Lakshmi and Saraswati. So I do not know whether it is going to benefit you or not. This session probably will help to solve the problem of development. Okay. On a stronger note, if you look at business is pragmatic, business is transactional, business is execution driven, evolutionary in nature, whereas literature is romantic, literature is more idealistic, evolutionary in nature. So what is the alignment? So is there an alignment? So we need to actually discuss that. I have the 7-point agenda to discuss if my panelists actually permit, and they would bring their experience. Is language of business is also literature? For example, I was talking to one of my investor, actually friend, who is an investment banker. He was saying that how they go ahead with actually deciding on investing in a company. He told me that despite of looking at the profit, loss, business model, everything, they also look at the partner, the way actually he gel with him. So it is more towards emotions, attachment of that individual with actually the investment banker rather than only the business model as well. Is the face of literature changing? The blogging, tweeting, the voice messaging is becoming the way of life. So the literature is not only actually is happening in your actually day-to-day life in terms of writing a book or reading a book, but it is also happening through blogging and tweeting. So the face of literature is changing. There were different languages for different occasions in the past. So if you look at Upendra Bhan's Sahitya, is not going to be understood by everybody. So the language of literature was different, language of business was different. That line is blurring. So if you look at people like Ravi Subramaniam, who brings actually business language into literature. So this is changing definitely, and the line is blurring. Can business and literature coexist? Yes, they can. If you look at the future generation of literature medium is going to be, or it has already happened, that is Facebook, Quora, your YouTube, all these actually places, if you look at the humongous amount of literature is getting created every day. The sixth one, which I have actually basic intuitiveness to understand that, you know, अगर बिजनेसमैन की पैसे से प्यार है, कैसे पे उसका जो मतलब लिटरेचर से कोई कनेक्शन नहीं है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, जैसे इन द जयपुर लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल वेयर वेदांत हैज स्पॉन्सर्ड, देयर वाज ए humongous effort to, you know, provide that name to that because Vedanta has sponsored it. There are activists who talked against actually saying ki why actually, you know, Vedanta has sponsored it, and you know why actually this, you know, literature festival should go on. So my question is, हमें सिर्फ उनके पैसे से प्यार है क्या? So ये अगर कलिंग लिटरेरी फेस्टिवल हो रहा है तो it's because of somebody like Indian Oil, somebody like Tata Steel, somebody like MCL, somebody like Nalco. So, you know, we need to understand that there is an alignment that is going to happen somewhere. The last one, but not the least, which is basically looking at the business leader himself, which actually talks about saying, you know, is the literature is the last stage of my professional accomplishment, which is basically getting nirvana after, let's say, you know, running a successful enterprise. For example, you have somebody like Subrata Bagchi, who is now actually, you know, writes several books. So, is it the literature is the medium to achieve nirvana for a business leader? So, you know, keeping this in mind and keeping the expertise and experience of my, you know, co-panelists, we are going to debate on several of these issues as well as a little bit wider stuff around what are the different best practices of aligning business and literature. So I would, you know, end with actually a couplet which I wrote in the morning today, which says, महफिलों में हम आए हैं जरूर दोस्तों, महफिलों में हम आए हैं जरूर दोस्तों, हमारा भी दिल है पैसा व्यापार के सिवा, हमारा भी दिल है पैसा व्यापार के सिवा, हमें बदनाम ना करो पत्थर दिल समझ के, हमें बदनाम ना करो पत्थर दिल समझ के, ये भी धड़कता है गालिब की लफ्जों से. So I would like to ask, you know, Charudat to talk about actually, you know, how it is going to impact actually business and literature in the daily life. And you know, he has created a very interesting, you know, presentation, and then simultaneously we can also keep asking actually, you know, question. So Charu, you have actually, you know, 4 minutes. So you have to help me out with this because I have to catch my flight. If you want me to give my flight, then that's it. Thank you so much.
Beautiful green. So we should have smiles, and it's a Sunday morning. रविवार सकाळ ओडिया को पाए मध्यबित्त ओडिया परिवार पाए बहुत खुशी और बहुत भलर जिनस तेणु आपण माने समस्त खुशीर सहित इंटैक्ट करिवे. दैट इज द फर्स्ट ग्राउंड रूल ऑफ दिस प्रेजेंटेशन. I'll start the presentation by saying that I was very fortunate to be born to late Sri Pramod Panigrai and late Srimati Mandakini Panigrai, because since my childhood literature has been inculcated into our household. So literature is not a rebound. I do business, I do profit, and I also do literature because I want to take a redemption. It's not a redemption, it's not a rebound. Literature is in everyone's DNA. We have to take it out. So the first point in my presentation is, we as, because this is Kalinga Literary Festival, we as Odias, we know that there are two kinds of controls, internal control and external control. All of us sitting here and listening, all of us outside this room want to express themselves. So this is a mode of expression. So it can coexist with business. There is nothing like demarcating business, profit, prestige and literature. Number one point. So many years ago somebody asked me, why do you write? You are from business school and you know how to run businesses. Why do you write? My immediate question, counter question to him was, what do you think, why do I write? I write because it makes me happy. I write because I have to have a window to my expressions, and I write because I want to be alive. I want to be young. All of us want to be young, and this is a very simple panacea, very simple formula to be young. express yourself. Whether you want to write, whether you want to act, whether you want to shout, whether you want to sing, express yourself. So that's where I take my learning from Helen Keller, who says literature is my utopia. How do you express utopia? Utopia is excitement. Utopia is instant excitement. Utopia is fantastic. How do you explain fantastic? There are many things in life you can't explain. For me, literature is inexplicable. I cannot define literature. Can it be esoteric? Can literature be different? Can we say that I do business but I don't do literature? Is literature something to be done? I don't think literature is something to be done. Literature, don't club literature with CSR, literature with business, literature with profit, literature with prestige. There is no ego in literature. There is no ego because I, as a writer, as an expressionist, I can be quite at ease with myself, complete in silence with chaos all around. There is chaos all around, there is Luna Telo Sansar. Luna Telo Sansar, that is my hypothesis. So my answer to them is, you do so many things, you also write? Of course I write. Of course I sing. So literature cannot be esoteric as far as I think. I just want to play this for a second. I will not eat into your 4 minutes. I will allow you to go today. Don't worry. But there is something called technical glitch. Technology and literature are still not good friends. Because one is plastic, another is organic. So you cannot have organic with plastic go together. I'll continue. Why I wanted to play this song is to tell you that my imagination can go beyond my imagination. Because I have a fertile mind. Because literature is heart-brain. There is a marriage, you have heard a lot about how do you marry brain with the heart. There is a marriage with brain and heart because that's how we are willing to function. That's why we say the purpose of literature is to turn blood into ink. Orissa is now passing through a transition. Industries coming in, educational hubs mushrooming, health services coming in, many changes in sociology, many changes in anthropology. How do we maintain our originality if we talk so much about our language, if we talk so much about our originality, about our individuality, then we should do something to inculcate literature in every household, in every second child, every third child, everyone in the next generation. Because a literature can only sustain our civilization. If today Konark is suffering, if today something else is suffering, it is because we know we have to give that importance to literature which it deserves. Reading literature makes it smarter, makes it nicer, it is proved. It is a proven fact. In fact, I have met these Raymond and Keith, they are from York University of Canada, where they were studying on something very interesting, that reading fiction makes someone very empathetic. So you learn empathy, or you inculcate empathy, you inculcate knowing others, you develop your perspective of the world if you read literature, if you imbibe literature. Literature is not about coding from words, decoding words. You have to take a deeper dive, you have to immerse in literature to inculcate literature in you. And that is the hallmark of a civilization. We can say that we are descendants of Kharwala, but if we don't prove ourselves in our writing, in our thought process, it never happens. So, my next point is, please inculcate soft skills in people. Skill building is a big thing now in India. But where is soft skills? I am very proud as an Odia. I have written so many times that Odias and Odisha should be proud that we have soft skills. Soft skills is disappearing from the world. We have soft skills. Let's be proud about it. It's not a sign of weakness that I am soft-spoken. I did not fight always through my way. So we have to know what are our strengths, and it all emanates from literature. Every man's memory is his private literature. Somebody has said this, Nimrod. Every man's memory is his private literature. All of us know how to express. We need a window. Write what you know. There should be enough time for you, free time. I am saying this because I urge all of you to write, to keep the literature alive. Because having no time is not an excuse. Never an excuse. I don't have time, that's why I cannot write. I don't have time, that's why I cannot do this. Let's not get into the trap. All of us have time. Last, we are waiting to hear from all of you. Knock. There is a door. Knock. There is something called Tathata, where you are one with the universe. You are one with nature. Everybody, all of us sitting in this room, talking, not talking, are by ourselves an entity. So please knock. All of us are willing to hear you. All of us are listening. You were born with wings. Why prefer to crawl? We have imperatives in life. We have challenges in life. Will that stop us? Are we so small that for life we are going to compromise on literature? Should we do that? We are the only species in this world who thinks, who's got a brain, and also who's got a heart. Can we not do the simple marriage of brain and heart? This is my humble request to all of us, that please take literature romantically. Let romance prevail in life. Let's not forget that we are born to smile, and smile comes from literature, from our next generation getting into the cycle of literature, understanding, assimilating. So please try to assimilate, and I'll stop with a favorite line from one of my favorite authors, Gabriel Garcia Marquez. It said, between reality and nostalgia, I get raw materials for my work. There is reality, there is a strong reality, there is an impulsive, imperative, forceful reality, but there is also my dream. I can never stop dreaming. I can never stop dreaming. And that's because you are not a drop in the ocean, rather I think you are an ocean in a drop. Thank you so much.
Of literature, and what actually, profit is not such a bad thing, and you can do lot of activities around literature while actually doing other stuff.
On this subject, let me at the outset make it very clear, no business wants to do profit. They want to do profit, they don't want to go to loss. That is the ethos of any business. But the common denominator in this profit and loss analysis is the prestige. Whether he dodges profit, he dodges loss, but he wants prestige. There are simple ways in which possibly one can attempt that. So instead of going to the literature concept, although I have tried for the first time in my life because of inspiration from my better half, because two of my co-brother-in-laws had written 2 books. She told me, why you are not writing a book? I told her, I am not a literature man. But I co-located some CSR based practices in the country and tried to take them and analyze them and brought out some lessons which the business should follow, so that they do not go beyond this profit, loss, prestige accounting. Friends, if you see in the cycle of responsible business strategy, if you want to go to prestige, you have to travel quite a long path. You have to look into the business process innovation. You have to create a responsible business ecosystem. Each one will take a lot of time, but I am not going into details on that. And you have to see that you want into a mechanism in which it is sustainable and it is replicable and it creates impact. Then only you can earn prestige. It's a very complicated cycle. But If there is sincerity, there is direction, and probably business can look at that and target the prestige element. If you see in the entire world, this cycle has been followed by many people. But I have listed only 5, the internationally acclaimed companies, those who have become socially responsible following the entire process, what I have told you in the last slide. One of them is Microsoft and Yangley Green Energy, Merck and World Bank Group and Equipment Fund and all that. Let's look at what is the common denominator in all these people. I have just given the example of Microsoft in this. What Microsoft did when they tried to become socially responsible, they tried to create an inclusive ecosystem in their entire millions of people who are millions of employees who are working across the world. They have brought in the concept of employee giving. Each employee should give something. It's not a top-down approach. And they wanted that should be spark in the youth, because youth has tremendous power. If there is spark and there is something should come out from that, then obviously the wholesome will be very good and they will be more and more socially responsible. And that has been seen. Everybody knows about their socially responsible skills and how they have got the results. With this background, there was an analysis in 2015. They wanted, in India, the Futurescape wanted to draw a matrix of some good sample of Indian companies, how they are faring. If you look at these 4 quadrants, friends, you will find on the left hand side the low efficiency and high CSR spend companies are not good ones. Starting companies, it is fine. But if you go to the bottom corner, the 4th quadrant, these are the companies who are smart utilizers. They spend CSR spending less, but they got better CSR score because they followed that cycle and went to that prestige element in a better and faster and quicker manner. But I know I have to carry on. They are the smart utilizers and 20 companies, and they are the people who have demonstrated that the smartness in their CSR and other activities can go together and they can really do. And some of them I tried to list out here. If you see the 2013, Tata Steel, one of our Mishra here, I think it is not Dr. Mishra, whatever it is, was the ranking number 1 in the CSR score, and which was connected to the daily life. But in this year, Mahindra and Mahindra, and fortunately also we have a panelist from Tech Mahindra here today, and they have gone into the number 1. So this shows that even if you spend, intelligently if you spend money and you follow a proper trail, then possibly you can, in the CSR spending and CSR score, you can go up. So what do you take away from this, friends? And any company to be more effective in the CSR domain and to have a daily life impact, they should look at something. What is that? And to my mind, the most important thing is that it should create job and employment. And they should enter into new goods and services. When we talk of new goods and services, there are many innovative things. For example, if the solar power which is coming to this country in a big way, who will manage the solar power installations? There are new goods and services emerging in the market, and probably they should look at that, and they should also finally go into the equity promotion. Profitability should be their motto, but not profit making in their focus. So with this, friends, I think I must thank you for your attention. I will close it with one thing, that the way forward what I suggested. I come from Gujarat CSR Authority, which is the first of its kind in the country, and towards this act for the social entrepreneurship, one initiative we are taking, possibly we will share with the organizers here. We are creating a 100 crore fund, and we have already got commitment for that fund for about 40 crores. With that 100 crore fund, what we do, in the social entrepreneur side, particularly green energy management, we create about 400 entrepreneurs who manage about 20,000 skilled workers. So that is the nature of work, how the corporates can help in the daily life management. Thank you very much.
Still running a profitable business in a venture.
Great. How many seconds do I have? Okay, no. I'll take 90 seconds. But can I involve the audience here? Sujit, Debashis, I see a lot of very, very familiar faces.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. So
We have our volunteers there, right?
Correct.
With the mics.
So,
Hello.
So I'll speak for about 30 seconds on what we do. My name is Anustup Naik. I am from Bhubaneswar. I grew up here. Today I work for an enterprise called Exceed Education, which works with about 2,500 schools across the country. We are a for-profit social enterprise, and our work is in reforming the quality of primary and elementary school education. Most of the schools we work with are in small towns, in tier 2, tier 3 towns, including Odisha. We work here in Bhubaneswar, we work here in Jajpur, but many small towns. As many of you know, the quality of education in India, I would not say it leaves a lot to be desired. It is in a complete mess. India has 1 million schools, 1.3 million schools really. 1 million are government schools, Sarkari school, 0.3 million are private schools, 250,000 are private schools. The ASAR study, which Pratham takes out every year, shows that largely even 5th class children in India read at a level of class 3 or class 2 children. We are trying to fix this in our own way. We work with schools and we provide them a program which brings two things into the classroom. One, which takes this rote, chalk and talk kind of instruction, which is basically what I'm doing to you right now. I'm talking and you're listening, and that's exactly what happens in most classrooms. To change it into a 5-step process where each child not only listens to the teacher, but also does things with their own hands. If they're learning about buoyancy, if they're learning about fractions, they're actually doing things with their own hands. And then they're asking questions, and this is happening in 60,000 classrooms across the country. And we charge money for that, right? We're a for-profit institute. So our promise to the parent is this in a small town, that at 5 rupees a day, 5 tanka dinaku 5 tanka re, I can provide to you a higher quality education. In the same classroom, using the same teacher, using the same infrastructure. Education today is considered a non-profit entity. And I want to ask the audience that a 5 tanka ru jodi mu gote tanka rakhibi as an entrepreneur, so that I can hire the highest quality people in the domain to work and create high quality curriculum. What is wrong with that? Is it criminal? Because education is the holy grail. It's supposed to be non-profit. My wife Soni, who is here, is a teacher. She left her engineering career. In our country, primary school teachers earn less than a driver that you can hire in most countries. I mean, in most cities, you pay a driver 12,000, 13,000 rupees. In a primary school, teachers earn less than that. And we expect high quality people to come in and teach our children, and we expect to sit in rooms like this and pontificate as to why profits, money, markets are such bad words when it comes to education. I told you about those 1 million and 1.3 million schools. Let me tell you what happens next. So there are 1 million government schools, 0.3 million private schools. Out of every 100 kids that join class 1, 40 of them actually go to those private schools. Poor parents, these are lower middle class parents, instead of sending their children to a broken, free government schools, are taking out 15-20% of their earned income to send their children to private schools. They are my customers. They drive two-wheelers, they drive cycles, but they are willing to pay me a little bit of a premium for a better quality of education. And children going through the Exceed program are more confident, their concepts are clear, and like it or not, they're speaking better English. And there was a huge debate around language, and I'm very sympathetic to this debate with the doyens of Odia language here, but the society today is broken into haves and have-nots based on the English language. And unfortunately, that's the reality. So I want to open this up to the audience that what are your thoughts? Is it criminal to have quality entrepreneurs come into the private sector, give quality education? My friend Debashish, Sujit, both social entrepreneurs sitting in the audience. Do you think this is wrong, that high quality private entrepreneurship should not be allowed in education, and we keep pretending that this license Raj of the non-profit government system will continue? So that's my question to the audience.
Yeah, so, yes, sir. Anand here.
That when it comes to sharing the profit and taking it up, we find that difficulty in the state. I don't know, maybe in the metros they don't find that difficulty, but in Bhubaneswar we find that the parent is reluctant to pay that 1,000 rupees. But if I add a word international to my school, which I have not done till now, I can take that 3,000 rupees comfortably, just having a nice building, having absolutely no curriculum, classy places, well-dressed teachers, and that would do. Is that what education is moving towards? I would want you to answer to that question. Thank you.
And I hear your pain as someone who's left his... I happen to know him and his wife is a childhood friend of mine. But I think the reality is changing. I think the parents you are talking to is what I call India One. There are 3 Indias. And this is what my friend and partner Ashish Rajpal, who I've been working with, calls, and he even quotes Kishore Biani, Tinita India Chi. India 1, India 2 and India 3. India 1 drives cars. ए रूम रे जते जणा बसचंदी, दिस इज ऑल इंडिया 1. आपण प्रांजल भाବରେ ओडिया कहंतु किंबा देवाशीष भळे इंग्लिश कहंतु, यू आर स्टिल इंडिया 1. दैट इज नॉट द रियलिटी. रियलिटी is also not India 3. India 3 is struggling. तांका भाई education is a very very far-fetched commodity. But you know where things are changing is India 2. Bhubaneswar bahar ko ja Debashish. Go to the smaller towns, go to Jajpur. In Tamil Nadu, go from Chennai outside into Vellore, Madurai, Dindigul. You will see people who are riding bicycles, who are riding two-wheelers basically. I think India 2 is a very very big opportunity. There the parent is not going into a restaurant and spending 1,000 rupees and arguing with you why he shouldn't. There the parent is knocking on the doors and say, can I give you 500, 600 rupees and can you make my child speak English? Can you make my child write a little bit better in the examinations? Can you make my child a little better equipped than I was? That is another India, and I wish that in your entrepreneurial journey you will touch that at some point of time. I think it's a great market opportunity. There are more people, right? India 2 is a very very big market. I think there are 300 million people who live in India 2. India 2 is just standing outside. जो गाड़ी नहीं के अपन मैंने आचंदी अपन का ड्राइवर, अपन का shopkeeper, the demand there is very very high, and I would be much more hopeful about that. The second thing, I think India 1 needs to wake up from this kind of blindness to quality. You want quality, you have to pay for it. And I think that is already happening. And competition is not there. That's the biggest problem in private school education. The only people who can enter into private schools are people who have land, capital, buildings, not necessarily people who have education. And the only reason this is not happening is because private education has to be established as a non-profit trust. And only if you bring profits, you can get quality entrepreneurs into the domain. So I think there was a lot of bureaucrats here. Yeah, sure.
Sir, we'll come back to you. Can I invite actually my friend Sujit to come here to co-moderate this session? Sujit, please come. My question goes to Dr. Arun. My question is around the first point I raised while actually I was talking about how do you align business interest with the literature?
First clarification, I am not doctor, so I am not a PhD holder. Okay, I am just simple Arun Mishra. I was caught slightly unprepared, in the sense I didn't think that we would be discussing CSR here. I thought we were talking about literature. While you started off saying the conflict between Saraswati and Lakshmi, Saraswati is the medium to fulfill your soul. Today it is also a medium to fulfill your bank balance, which is the abode of Goddess Lakshmi. So one is not in conflict with another, one is also in the alignment with the other. If you see business and literature, I just give 2-3 points of my understanding of the situation. Literature is born out of society where there are interactions between human beings and interactions with the nature that takes place. No imagination can start without its roots in reality. Nobody imagines a ghost to be in the shape of a bacteria. Everybody imagines a ghost also a two-legged, running or flying, vanishing in the air. Nobody imagines a god apart from being a beautiful human being. Color and complexion is slightly, there are more fairer gods than there are darker gods. But generally the idea is the doing good kind of a character would have the good look kind of a human being, and that's the imagination starts from reality. So if the literature takes roots from society, business is nothing different from a society. Like the way you have fights and conflicts and politics in households, or between mother-in-law, son-in-law, daughter-in-law, father, mother, brother, which goes into Ramayana, Mahabharata to till that literature, which is the basis for writing stories. A business house is nothing different. Business house also has internal politics, new person joining, new person being harassed, somebody being denied promotion, somebody taking everything for a promotion and then getting, not getting, that somebody's aspirations being fulfilled, somebody's aspirations not being fulfilled. Strangely, in Indian literature, we don't write so much of stories about the aspect of a society that is existing within a business community. Our society takes business as an outside activity and the rest of the literature hovers around it. There are few, of course. We didn't have a story on 2008 financial crisis the way the English movies, Hollywood movies have come, where it's all about the tension, the conflict on 2008 crisis, that when the banks collapsed, there are some 3 or 4 guys who made money, how they made money, where did they start, and there is a story about that. There was a fantastic movie by Satyajit Ray, I am forgetting the name, between Pratibandhi and Aparajita, one of them, which talks about two heads in an organization. It's a beautiful piece of Pratibandhi. One VP marketing, one VP production, both aspiring for the position of a managing director who is going to retire soon and is a German. And these two guys are very terribly fighting with each other to go to the top. And the whole story revolves around that, how the organization politics takes place, how the HR guy gets involved, how industrial crisis is created, how when industrial relations are soured, and finally the production guy gets the position in spite of the product being defective. So when you have the product which is defective, the customer rejects, everybody thinks the manufacturing guy will be sacked, but actually he goes on to become a managing director. And that kind of a story in 1960s, Satyajit Ray could think of making a movie of a class that even relevant today, and I see it from the point of taking lessons, what happens in an organization. And so this is nothing different from that. There are other beautiful stories. There was a story of how George Bush's attack on Iraq affected a poor family in a remote village in Bengal. Now these two are two disconnected events. But the person who writes the story, his imagination goes so beautifully connecting the two events. So there is a Muslim-dominated village in a remote part of a state in India, where there is a Hindu girl falls in love with a Muslim boy who is very good looking like a film star. He does not want to do agriculture in the village. He has an ambition of making money and buying big bikes and taking his girlfriend around and all that. So he goes to Arab, he lands in Iraq, he gets a job in slitting the dates, taking the seeds out, stuffing it in chocolates or something that you get in Dubai airport. So that was his job. This girl is happy that the boy will come back after some time with lots of money, their aspirations will be fulfilled. Then the Iraq war starts. The village where there were Hindu-Muslim conflicts, everybody gets together around one television set every day because there is no news of the children from the village who have gone to Iraq. So all they can see is the television news, and every time a dead body is shown, they try to figure out whether that is one of the village boys who is settled in Middle East. And the girl impatiently waits. Someday the boyfriend's face will come up. And after a lot of wait, then they get a letter. The letter written by the boy to the girl that I am okay, alive, don't worry about me, blah blah. So everybody is happy. The girl is not happy. She somehow discovers that once her boyfriend had written something in his left hand, this letter writing looks like he has written in his left hand. And she has a fear that perhaps her boyfriend has lost his right hand. And she thinks that if he has lost his right hand, what is use of that money when he comes back? How will he ride the bike? And she goes to the mirror. She stands in front of the mirror and looks at the letters very clearly. Then she confirms that it is his left-handed writing. When the entire village is celebrating, she is the most unhappy woman on earth. She writes a letter to George Bush. Why did you attack Iraq? You should have thought of me. And that's the story. So there is a story around every aspect of life, every aspect of how we interact, what we think of, the emotions that goes in. So I just thought I will place those facts before you go further.
Thank you very much, sir. It's nice to be a facilitator when the previous one has taken flight. And thanks for bringing back literature. I'm sure some of the aspiring writers here would see an opportunity in taking business as a background. Though there are people now like Ravi Subramaniam who are writing, but yeah, serious fiction is yet, in India particularly, is yet to engage. We still have one speaker, Mr. Jena. Would you like to speak? Your thoughts on the questions Bhavani raised, or anything that you would like to speak about the intersection, particularly between market and literature?
I'm still confused what to actually speak about. Okay, let me speak about my experience of authoring 2 books, and those are not literature, those are serious general category books or management books. Those 2 books did extremely well, and I did make, if not lots of money, loads of money, quite a decent amount of money on royalty. But still would not have been enough to probably quit the job and pursue a full-time career in writing. Let me probably give some probably guidelines to a lot of people or the wannabe writers here. I work in the IT industry, and the first book I wrote about, I thought that why not to write about the IT industry. And I had many friends, and the most famous friend being Chetan Bhagat. We are contemporaries in IIT. And you could see he's quite successful. And all the books that he has written, actually he relates to his time or whatever, the experience he had. So I thought that, okay, fine, Chetan does it, so that Jena can do it. So I thought that, at that time I would I've already spent maybe around 10 years in the IT industry. I said that, why not to write something about Indian IT industry. Everybody talks about Indian IT industry as, why IT industry became so famous, or why we came to be known as, the world's center stage for IT work or IT outsourcing. What is it that made India's IT superpower? the usual things that we know, like, we are well educated, our parents are caring, they spend everything to send us to education, to best of the schools and colleges. We are pretty intelligent because we clear all the IIT and NIT entrances and medical entrances. All those you can still go on. We have good family support also. You can still go on to probably 10, 11, 12. Few guys have even, when I held lecture in the engineering schools or MBA schools, they have also told me 16. But for the next 6, you possibly have to read that book. Reading that book. So I titled that book called 22 Things You Should Know About Indian IT. That did extremely well. Any engineering colleges I have been there, they have at least, if not hundreds of those, probably at least few of those in their colleges, just to let the students who would be getting into IT industry to know what Indian IT is all about. What is they are already living organisms of Indian IT. They are already in the cradle. So it's basically nothing more than knowing about themselves, knowing about them, knowing about their family, knowing about the country, and knowing about supposedly the G family or Gandhi family that whom now you abuse so much. If there is somebody, if somebody made an engineer out of India, it was one, possibly a Gandhi Nehru family, Jawaharlal Nehru. But if somebody made an IT engineer out of that engineer, it was Rajiv Gandhi. So a few of the things I described in there. So it was purely writing out of experience. It took very less time, and mostly while waiting in the airports or inside the flight, I finished it. Then the second, when I went about writing the second book, I had already graduated to being in the echelons of the senior management in my organization. And as it happens, all the senior people, the CXO layer in the organization, you have to be a salesman. All of us, will realize that. We become salesmen. We have to sell the company. We have to sell the project. And in IT, what do we call selling bodies? Sometimes people say that, "Kya karta hai? Kya bechta hai?" You have to say that Hindi mein, "Jism bechta hu." So, so bad. But it's all about selling bodies, selling if not thousands, actually lakhs of bodies. We have to sell. Say in my organization, Tech Mahindra, we actually sell the time of almost close to 2 lakh people. And the earlier organization TCS, while I was working prior to this time, so maybe TCS is selling the time of close to 3 lakh or 3.5 lakh people. So then I thought that being a salesman or being selling for last 4 or 5 years, why not just write my experience on salesmanship? So I wrote a book which currently doing quite well in overseas market, and when it does overseas market, where while in India it sells for 150 rupees, in overseas it sells for $10. The royalty is almost $2 or something. That's good amount. So in that salesmanship book, what I did is that I just listed down the field situation or the situation that I get into when I go to sell my company or sell the product and services of my company, and most of the time you actually sell yourself also, all these 3 categories. So then I picked up 27 field situations. I thought that how I behaved, or how the people in the companies behaved, or how everybody behaved or so. So that's why the title of that book is A Salesman's Lessons. Those 27 lessons I learned being a salesman, and the subtitle is What I Studied is What I Failed to See. I correlated those 27 situations I faced day in, day out to laws of nature, literature, management, engineering, possible all mythology, all. It is quite a fun book. It has done well, and people have appreciated that. Sorry.
Thank you very much. I think it's a very interesting panel we've had, in the sense of very diverse backgrounds. I mean, most of these 2 days will be listening to, people who profess literature, in a way, engage seriously in the art and craft of literature. But like we're joking about the contemporary youth today, and we say that India is a country where nowadays young people first become an engineer and then figure out what they want to do. And a lot of new writers are now basically people with an engineering background or done management or probably law, which is the new engineering now. But I just remember one small story I would like to share here. There's a friend of mine, Harsh Nehanshu, who wrote a first novel which was a bestseller, and then he stopped writing, and now he's got into startups. And he said, when I reflected, I don't know, maybe that was his way of justifying what he's done or the career change that he's made. He said that I realized that I'm not really a writer. I just realized that there's an opportunity of writing a bestseller if I write about this. And I did that. And then I realized now that I'm actually better at tapping opportunities. So I would rather be a startup entrepreneur rather than continue to be a writer. So anyway, I think we'll just have one question, because that question my previous facilitator had kept it on hold. Professor Patnaik, I think you have a question for Anustup probably? Yeah, and we'll just... Yeah.
I think here, India 1 is talking to India 1.
Yes.
We are not talking to India 2, not to India 3. My question is, do you have the language with which you speak to the children and to their guardians, to their parents? Then only can talk about quality, because we take it for granted that people with whom we are going to talk, they have no quality. And we have all the quality, and we are going to give them some quality. That is the assumption with which all the people who are talking about quality education, they start, and that is where they end. So my question is that.
Sir, बहुत बढ़िया question बदल. I'm glad you asked this question. For the first 5 years, we were also talking India 1 language. And the India 1 language is that of usually borrowed from intellectuals in the West and in the East. So I had just come back from America from a so-called known university. So quoting John Dewey or Aurobindo Krishnamurti was, that's the language of the armchair intellectuals of India. In 2008, I went to Tamil Nadu as a traveling salesman. When we created this curriculum, I went and sold it to schools. So I would knock on the doors of school owners in smaller towns. That is when I learned the language of India too. So when we started implementing this curriculum, mo classroom ko jab pila mane padhothibe, teachers mane padhothibe, pila mane they responding. Then I talk to parents and I say, "Jo exit curriculum aschi apanko school le, what do you see?" So India too does not talk about quality in saying differentiated instruction and experiential learning and all the fancy stuff I had learned in my Harvard master's degree. Say, middle class mother tells me, se nijo bhasha re jo bahi re jota lekha hitila buoyancy kima fractions se kahi paruchi je fractions ta hochi gote bada pithar gote part seitu mu jani paruchi je se ପାଠ ପଢୁଛି ଆପଣଙ୍କର exit program ରେ. That is how I know that he is able to say in his own words what was written in the book. Once we got hold of that language, it became so easy to talk in the language that people understand. But it took, sir, 10 years and I'm still learning. But thank you for asking this question. It's very humbling to understand India too. But I know you've been dying to ask a question.
Very diverse prestige or reputation. And third is maybe personal experiences that you are sharing. So I will start from the last one. So maybe in 2016, many of the companies, I belong to an IT company, many of the companies are moving out of the so-called body shopping. That no longer works. That is one. Second thing, see...
Raman, do you have a question? Because I think they are hurrying us.
Yeah, just 1 minute. On social entrepreneurship, the education, see, Middle India, what we are talking of, right? That's the Middle India. Top India, forget, right? People will take care of themselves. Bottom of the pyramid, that's also we are not looking at. Middle India, the exit thing that you have been saying, all the big international schools, they are also trying to look at. Very interesting point that you brought up. The 5 ଟଙ୍କାରେ ଦିନକୁ 5 ଟଙ୍କାରେ ମୁଁ education ଦେଇପାରିବି, quality education. এই ଜିନିଷଟା, if it is really true, and the social entrepreneurs, those who are there in the education. Jodi eita really establish heji ba tongka te rakhantu 1.5 tongka rakhantu that doesn't matter. ଆପଣ ପ୍ରଫିଟ୍ ରଖନ୍ତୁ ଏଇ ଜିନିଷଟା ସାରା ଓଡ଼ିଶାରେ ସାରା ଭାରତବର୍ଷରେ ଲାଗିଯିବା ଦରକାର and bottom of the pyramid ଯେଉଁ ଜାଗାରେ ଏଜୁକେସନ୍ ନାହିଁ 150 rupees is not a big amount କୌଣସି ଲୋକ ପାଇଁ right ଯଦି this is what is the thing that you have been saying if it is a fact ମୁଁ ହେଉଛି ଏଇଟା ଗୋଟେ ଭଲ ଦୟା it's a boon for everybody so whether it's a profitable opportunity it's good so that's the point so my thing was this is the only way that we can be not only market savvy, market will take care of our business so that social life and human life will be really very happy and useful and educationally elevated.
Thank you. I think this.
Like I said, we have the book release now, so I would request to get Vignet by one of our panelists sitting here, Mr. Sharudat Manigai. Can we have a round of applause? He's here with us.
This is a small attempt to pack extraordinary into the big vacuum that we have called ordinary. I hope you like this.
I would first, now request Mr. Sambit Kumar Mishra, whom I had requested from the Odia Society of Singapore. He had come and felicitate our panelists in the session before. We would also like to felicitate him. So I would request the esteemed panelists to do the honors. I request Mr. Arun Mishra. Yeah, book. Okay, Ole, we first have the. Have the photographers are never convinced till they have the right pictures, the right photographs. Yeah, I know. I would now request our esteemed panelists to felicitate Mr. Sambit Kumar Mishra, to felicitate him. Yeah, I'll request Mr. Devraj from our KLF team to first felicitate Mr. Sambit Mishra. President of Odia Society of Singapore, has been extensively working to promote Odia culture out there. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, ask him to host KLF in Singapore.
Yeah, we want that KLF next to be hosted in Singapore. Sounds good. I also don't mind traveling. Lage haath mauke pe chauka. Sir, would you like to speak a minute?
Basically, I am not a speaker. I'm a very bad speaker. So now readers are required. And I actually invite the KLF team next August 3rd week. We are doing Invest Odisha and centenary in Singapore. I invite the KLF team to join us. Then we make some business. We'll do it in 3rd week of August. So keep your calendars free. Thank you. Thank you for facilitating me and recognizing Singapore Odia Society. Thank you. Thank you, Rosina.
All right, now I would request Mr. Devraj to please felicitate all our esteemed panelists. Thank you. Now I would request our co-convener, Mr. Debraj. He would speak something about the festival in the coming year. So, Mr. Debraj.